little bit.
Ah,
Yes. People are joining now.
great. Ooh, people are interested in UX, UI.
Hello.
Hey, y'all.
Okay,
Great.
so
Good.
good afternoon, everyone. We are here from Wincode Academy. I'm here with Gessica. Wincode is an amazing academy. They have UX, UI programs and also web development here in Miami. So we are here. I came here. I love the academy. They are helping a lot of designers. And she is the head instructor of the program here. So I decided to come here and talk about that.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. We feel so honored to be part of this presence right now, and we know that you have such a huge following, and I personally really appreciate anyone who has such interest in what user experience is or what UI is and how it might be different, which it is.
Can you hear as well? Please comment yes if everything is okay. I guess. Okay.
Do we have thumbs up on the audio?
Yeah,
great.
perfect.
So that's real-time feedback.
Awesome. Thank you for coming and joining us today.
Yeah. So, we're here in beautiful, I don't know what your audience is. Is it worldwide or local?
Yes.
Yeah. So, beautiful Miami, Wynwood, hence Wincode. And although it's Wincode, that doesn't mean that design is not part of the technology scene. And so a lot of times what's good to note, by the way, I think is when people say they want to get into tech, I think for someone that has no idea, they think I need to know how to code or I need to learn how to code, which is definitely one avenue. There is another avenue for people like myself I've always been creative, and I wanted to express my creativity in the real world, and that's how I ended up doing user experience.
And you also work for Coca-Cola, ESPN, and people call you the cruise girl.
Yeah, so I've always worked for agencies, ad agencies or digital agencies, and the benefit of doing that is that you get to work with so many different brands. And if you work for a large agency, you probably work for large brands. So some of those that you mentioned, and then Google, while I was in San Francisco, I always call it my tour of duty, like if I was in the military. Everyone should go to San Fran just to experience that a little bit. I worked with an agency, and one of our clients was Google and Facebook, and then Samsung eventually as well. So lots of big client names, which is
That's nice.
great experience, and it also gives you diverse experience.
Yes.
So that you don't get called the cruise girl.
Yes. It's not only that.
Yeah.
So the topic of today is Lean UX. What is it? How we can apply it to our daily creative process, and to get better.
Yes. So Lean UX. If anyone has heard of Lean UX, it's a methodology. It's also a book that was written a couple years ago. It's actually a set of frameworks, not a rigid process. So I adopt this thinking. Many UX methodologies will say you do not have to follow this by the book, step by step by step. There's certain things that need to be in a cadence, like you always do research before you design. But the framework should be somewhat flexible. So it's not rigid process. It's a framework. It's something that you could latch onto and live by.
Okay.
And
Oh, that's interesting. And where does it stand in the industry?
So right now in the industry, something interesting happened. Lean UX is actually the practice itself relies less on deliverables and more on value. So what you're trying to do is not spend 2 weeks creating a UX audit or a competitive assessment presentation. So actually, great example here in the classroom that you can see is exactly that. We are getting out of the business of deliverables and in the business of taking what's being elevated from this exercise and putting it then into our designs. So a lot of agencies have a list of deliverables as part of the scope of work. And so you end up spending a lot of time making things client ready and really perfect. But in the end, there's something that's coming out of that exercise. So in the audit here, what's on the wall here, we call this externalizing our work. We do use a lot of Post-it notes. And by externalizing, we can see things kind of come to light. So what are the big takeaways? So I'd rather focus my time and attention on that than maybe doing half the amount of work and then spending 2 weeks putting a presentation together that looks perfect. So
because sometimes we spend a lot of time trying to make the product perfect and we stay there.
Or even just the step-by-steps that the end user will never see that presentation that you handed off to your client.
Okay.
So the research, right, if that's all put into a presentation, ultimately the research is going to fuel the end designs. And that's what we want to do is push the value to the end piece. We're still going to do the whole process, but we're not going to spend a lot of time creating beautiful presentations.
Okay.
So I guess just to get into a little bit more of what Lean UX is.
Yes.
I have this analogy that's in the presentation that we'll share with all of you where it's like a smoothie. And so
a delicious smoothie.
A delicious smoothie, wait till you see it. And it's really a set of multiple methodologies. So for example, one of the ingredients of that smoothie in Lean UX is user experience design. So that's something that's all over the years been mostly attached to human-centered design or design thinking by IBM. So the one ingredient is user experience design. The second is agile software development. So how quick, I hate to say the word quickly, but how efficiently can we move through our cycles to get the product designed and efficiently, right? And we want working software over documentation in agile as well. And then there's lean startup as the third ingredient, which uses build, measure, learn. And in that case, you're thinking about minimum viable products and you're trying to get something out into the market very quickly to learn from. And that's what equals Lean UX.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the Lean UX process and how the teams can achieve that?
Yes. Okay. So Lean UX, and also this is something back to where does it stand in the industry, is just that a lot of companies have been a little hesitant to adopt Lean UX. And what I found when I was interviewing people in San Francisco, I would say, how much experience do you have with Lean UX? And almost, I like to do my data-driven comments here is, I would say like 8 out of 9 people that I interviewed would say, well, I wanted to do it within my organization, but they wouldn't let me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think the reason is really kind of what I just talked about is, oh no, how are we going to charge clients for all those stacks of paper that we used to charge them for? So it's a little bit of a shift in terms of how your relationships are forming with your scope of work. But some of the underlying principles in Lean UX, as sort of just breaking apart all of those 3 ingredients, is as agile states removing waste, quality over deliverables. So this is the piece that I think companies can get hung up on a little bit. Creating harmony, so collaboration over isolation. What is an example of that? And I think a great example is, has anyone ever worked with a development team in another country?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That should be hard.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. So we want to collaborate and work together versus you go sit at your desk, I'm going to go sit here, or even worse, you're in a different country.
Okay.
So, and then do experiment, definitely multiple rounds of experiments on your nav, on your flows, on your wireframes. You want to iterate. So the feedback loop is really important there. And then thoughtful teams, talk about team over hero. In the olden days, if anyone ever used to watch Mad Men in advertising, there was the creative director and the copywriter, and they were the heroes. They came up with all the great ideas, right? And Lean UX is about a group collective bringing everything together and coming up with the best ideas, not you or me.
Yeah, it's not only one hero or two, so everyone is a hero in the team.
I love that. Absolutely. So, and then when we think about the things that we need, that we'll have to get to really have that harmony, would be an understanding of a common language. And I don't mean like language literally, but like if we use acronyms, does everyone understand what the acronyms are? When we say release 1, is it the same release 1 that you're thinking? And then we have we also in Lean UX use assumptions a lot, and assumptions actually drive a lot of what we create. Our assumptions are things we think are true about our users. So let's say we're coming up with the Uber app before it existed. I'm assuming that people will be comfortable getting into strangers' cars. I would have to push that through to fact or disprove it. So assumptions play a big role. Hypothesis that comes out of our assumptions after we've learned a little bit more. The problem statement is, there's a template for the problem statement in here. And we're really just saying what we believe our problem is, how we might be able to solve it, and what is our KPIs, as in how do we measure our success. So, and thanks everyone, so many more people are joining in, this is so good. And then we also have an idea of personas, and personas are somewhat controversial. Some people like them, some people don't. What I would say is you want to understand who your end audience is, or your end user. So that's all I would say about that. And it's going to take dedication. That's my own personal one that I would add. So how are we going to get to all of that agreement is, again, and to really good products, value over deliverables is by collaborating, like we talked about. So if you're an extrovert, or you like, solving problems with other people, this is a great avenue to do that. And thank you guys. Aww. And then we would have conversations rather than just emailing or screenshotting and putting it in Jira, and meanwhile you sit right next to me. So I could just grab you and talk to you. And then doing design studios, which is just iterating 6 times on a different screen, on the same screen. Design systems are a great way to avoid having to create a lot of documentation as well, because that will play a huge role in the development of the product. So, for example, button styles, fonts, spacing, all of those things that when you look at a developed product, that when you say, ooh, this doesn't look like a designer was behind it, that wasn't communicated well. So design systems play a huge role these days, and you want to get agreement in your team that these are things that will be beneficial to you. I've heard one. Aw. Thanks, Jay Castillo. Is that right? Yes. Awesome. And then the one I added here is prioritization. So what are we doing? What are our main goals? And we should all agree on that.
And what if we send the product, the final product, the app, to a programmer or something, and then we start saying, oh, we forgot something about it, and the programmer already is doing the process. What happened in that case?
Okay, so in that case, so if you're using agile software development methodology, then that thing that you forgot is probably going to need to be added to the backlog. And then we would get to that unless it's a blocker and it's something that we need to re-engineer in. But hopefully we've done our due diligence and that doesn't happen. But changes always come, and we prioritize them. And so prioritizing comes in all different areas.
Yeah, that's part of Lean UX, to be able to do the process better and faster. And quality.
Right, and so that's a good point. So let's say, so hopefully with Lean UX, you didn't just spend 2 years designing.
Okay.
You may have, or 2 years developing. So ideally you're moving in 2-week sprints. So if we go down the wrong path, we really only sacrifice those 2 weeks. And that's if that's all they did. And usually there's multiple features in a sprint. So if we were to have to fix something, we're not waiting till the very end, which would be waterfall. So that's why waterfall has been shunned a little bit.
Oh,
yeah.
And why do you think that people and companies are so afraid or avoiding Lean UX, knowing that they can save a lot of time and, I don't know, avoiding that epic
catastrophe at the end? So I'm speculating, but I think that because most of the work gets put into the end product. So a lot of our research, so you could pay a research company, like $30,000 just to run a focus group. What we're saying is, why can't you just go to Starbucks, or what Lean UX is saying is, why not just go to Starbucks and do it for free, or buy people a couple cups of coffee? And so if you think about that, you're hitting somebody's revenue line. By saying we could do it a little bit more efficiently, it may also appear like we're not doing due diligence. So those are all things, just, things to discuss and things to educate your client on. And the truth is, we're still doing all our due diligence. We still do the research. We still do all our phases where we do research. We do our designs where we start with hand-drawn sketches. I'm pointing to the wall because they're actually up here on the wall, where we start with hand-drawn sketches, move into wireframes. In between, we're testing with users, and then we have our high-fidelity mock-ups that also get tested. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yes.
Yeah.
That's very. It's a different thinking, and it's a new process. I guess I have a question here. How much of the UX program WinCode is dedicated to each aspect of UX, research, design, development, etc.?
Okay, great question. So the way I break it down is the first 2 weeks, it's a 10-week course. The first 2 weeks are the complete framework from end to end for digital design, not development of a coding or any of that. It's the design process. And it's split into multiple phases. There's the learn phase, which is research. Define, which is defining our customer, our user. Then design, which we start doing our designs based on the research. And then experiment, iterate, and launch. And so the first 2 weeks we go through the full framework. Then we spend 1 full week on each of the phases. So, I mean, it's a significant amount of time that we're spending on the UX side. And then UI falls into the design, like almost like maybe not halfway through, maybe a little bit before halfway. We're doing little, UI, UX, wireframing and things like that in Sketch, but I spend a significant amount on the UX part. And then toward the end, we do so design, experiment, and iterate are all part of design. So you see it's about 50-50.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's cool. Jay Castillo, she answered your question. You want to know something else?
Any others there?
Okay, so let's move into the minimal viable product.
So I have this cool diagram. I wish you guys could see it right now, but you'll see it where it's a pyramid. And on the bottom is functional, then reliable, then usable, and then emotional design. And what most companies do is they tackle a sliver of just the functional. So you'll get a product back from development and they'll say, well, it works, but it's lacking reliability, usability, and emotional design. So we always say we don't want the sliver of one ingredient of that pyramid. We want a sliver of all the pieces. So when you see the presentation, we're trying to get a good or like a little snippet of good at each of those ingredients versus just a sliver of the functionality. Because you really, if you think about Airbnb, VRBO existed. I don't know if you know, Vacation Rental by Owner was a website that existed for many years. You could rent a home from someone. Their interface was horrible. So when so it was functional. It took me a long time, but I'd be able to find a home that I could rent. Now with Airbnb, they took it to a whole another level where they're thinking about all those other pieces, usability, emotional design, like things, and then reliability, just being quick to respond. So what would tend to happen is a difference between Airbnb and VRBO from the past, because now VRBO has caught up, is that you couldn't do a lot of the back and forth. Oh, let me look at this house. Oh, no, look at this one. It was a lot of drilling down, and so search and browse was not very easy. So that's kind of an example there. And when we think about a product mindset, so Lean UX does really employ a lot of product thinking, product mindset. And in that life cycle, if we break it up into, you think of the idea, you build it, you launch it, and then you improve it. So that's kind of the cadence there. By the way, how long is the UX UI program? Thank you for using the correct title, by the way. UX comes before UI. I'm on a rampage lately to correct the world. Don't say UI UX, because to me it's like a giveaway that you don't know what you're talking about. Sorry to be so blunt, but I'm open to hearing why people would do that. I posted something on LinkedIn recently. But yes, thank you for that. The program is 10 weeks, so it's a little bit more than 2 months, and we also come out of the cohort with 3 project briefs. So as a person who built a UX team and hired many designers, if I saw less than 3 case studies on their portfolio, I would tend to move on to the next person. So I definitely knew I needed to make sure everyone came out with 3 projects and a good, strong portfolio, ready to start interviewing on that next day after the class ends. So you'll have a portfolio there too. Yeah. So, okay, so I'm going to do a little, so this is a fun little quiz here. In what I was just mentioning about the product mindset and lifestyle. So I'm thinking I want to make a car, right? Yes. Class starts April 1st, by the way, the next cohort. So let us know if you want to come join us. And then,
sorry, I need to grab something right here.
he's here. So if I think of this idea, it's a car. Okay, we all know what a car is now, but let's say I need to just get something out there to learn from. So what could I make? What do I need? Does anyone want to guess? Anybody on the Instagram there? I need to build a car. What is a minimum viable product of a car? So what I need really is, okay, do I need 4 wheels and a frame? Maybe. Okay, maybe. But what's my job to be done? There's a recent thinking around jobs to be done. Well, the car is a solution for the problem of getting from point A to point B. So technically, do I really need a frame and 4 wheels, or could I have a scooter with 2 wheels? That would get me from point A to B. And I could launch that as my MVP, learn from it, and continue to iterate on it. So travel, yes, getting from one place to the next. If I were to improve on the scooter, what is my next iteration so that I can get to the car or the automobile? Any guesses there? I know people are probably like, oh wait, I want to. So while you guys are typing in, I'll give you a couple ideas. So we go for, I have to make this car. Okay, but really I just have to get from somewhere to somewhere. So I could use, okay, multiple passengers. All right. So if I go from the scooter, yeah, maybe I can only fit one person. My iteration on the scooter to get me to the automobile might be a bicycle. I still probably can only fit one person unless I'm in Holland and they have like the little, you can fit multiple people in Holland. You can have your little guest on the back, or a motorcycle, which could also fit a couple different people. Yeah. But now I'm starting to get rained on, the elements are cold, and so I'm learning, I'm iterating, and then eventually I can get to the car. So that's a good example of, you may want to build a car, but couldn't you just start with a scooter? And that's like, apply that to the real world, you know? So I'm trying to think of an example, maybe a digital product out there like, I guess Airbnb or Uber again. Maybe I just have one feature, maybe I don't need to launch with everything.
I have an example that is,
yes.
I always love it, is Credit Karma to check your credit status.
Yeah.
So they started with just able to see your credit score if you have a car, and then last days they added like taxes, they added every day like a score hack to be able to help you improve your credit score, and then that will be an example.
That's a good example. Yes, the Credit Karma. Most apps will do that, or digital products, where it's like, what are the absolute must-haves? And so if you think of an idea, sometimes you have to say, well, what is the minimum that we can do? One, it could get user adoption. It starts to train you on how to use it and things like that. Yeah.
That's cool. And so we have been discussed real world examples, but in the real world, how we can use it.
Yeah. So those were good real world examples for the present. There's a great story, and I use this in the class. I love history and I love innovation, and so these two things kind of go together. So there's a gentleman by the name of Frank Sprague out there in the world, and he was actually one of the people to be able to really take credit for the first underground electric railroad. And that was in Boston, Massachusetts. And yay, Boston. I'm like, I have an affinity for Boston because I lived there for a lot of years, and my family is all from Boston as well. And so it's such a great story. Why? Because so this was in 1897. 1897, okay, that was more than 100 years ago. What Frank Sprague did is he demonstrated our example of an MVP. And he created the MVP of this concept that was totally foreign at the time. Some of the things that he had to combat were electricity. So London had an underground railroad, but it was coal operated. And so you would get off the train and you'd be covered in soot, and it just wasn't ideal. So Frank Sprague had this genius idea to reinvent this idea of a train. And so what he had to do for his first MVP, when he finally got an investor to buy into it, is build 12 miles of track, build an electrical plant with 375 horsepower, create overhead electric lines, build 40 train cars, and at least 80 motors. And guess how fast or how long it took him to do that? So this is crazy. 90 days. 90 days to create a physical industrial revolution product.
Wow.
And it's unbelievable. So I always use this example because if he could do that in 90 days, we should not take more than that time to launch a digital product.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the other things that are really cool is what his process was. Is first he sketched it, which was is just like our process. So he thought of the idea, right? He wanted to build this underground train system. The problem was there was, and I love the way they describe it in the video, a cacophony of noise and smells. So in downtown Boston, it was the fastest growing city at the time. There was horse-pulled trains on like above ground. So imagine it was not safe, and it was noisy and dangerous for people across the street because there were horses on the street.
Yeah.
And also horses do something like, that ended up all over the streets. So then it didn't.
That's horrible.
Yeah. So now we're trying to like walk over landmines and things like that. So as he thought of it, he sketched it out. He built it. He built the MVP. The other thing that was really interesting here is in his demonstrations, things were exploding. People were scared of the underground. The underground meant you were getting closer to death. That was the perception.
Wow.
So he was battling a lot of different pushback from different places. And then he technically launched it just like our other MVP example of the automobile, where he launched, and in September 1st, 1897, the results were 250,000 riders on day one, 50 million passengers in the first year. Immediately decongested the roads of Boston, Massachusetts.
90 days.
and so that was the test plan, right? And then he continued to build on it. He created a framework that many other cities then adopted. And so he built one track that then was able to be built off of multiple lines, and then other cities like New York, Philadelphia, and others would soon follow. So they used his framework. So there's a lot of good analogies there. And that's sort of the public transportation system that we know today in most cities.
Wow. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. So it's just a good real world example, and like I always say, it's kind of a gut check to be like, well, if they could do it and what they accomplish in 90 days, our technology is so much more malleable and flexible that we should be able to do that in less than 90 days. So,
of course. And what else you want to share with us?
Yes. Well, you'll see it in the presentation, but the stages in Lean UX, and again, this is sort of more process, is you're really trying to identify the problem. There's a lot. I don't know if you ever downloaded an app or used a product that felt like, or maybe an app is a good example, and then you deleted it pretty soon after. So I think what happens a lot of time is people make up problems and then solve for the made up problem. So technically there's no need, but so if you don't try to tackle solving a problem, then you're just making up a solution to a problem that doesn't even exist. So that's probably why you didn't use it. It wasn't useful to you. Because it wasn't really doing anything, or maybe the design was really poor. So the problem statements are a great place to start, and then so then we start to think about who is our user, who is our persona, what things do we think we know about them would be the assumptions, and then turning those into a hypothesis, prioritizing the things we need to keep exploring or pushing, and then you're in your design phase. And so, because now I have more confidence in what I'm designing, and then there's some sort of MVP in Lean UX. An MVP could be a landing page that doesn't really do anything. It could be a button that goes nowhere, but you should make it go somewhere if you get a lot of traction.
I remember an example of a software that they first created a website and then they put subscribe to let me know when the product is available.
Yeah.
So you're gonna receive an email that say, hey, the software is available, come and explore, but you already in the database.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
That's a great example of a feature fake, or just even getting like some data to say people would be interested in this. So let's say, for example, that's a good example. Does anyone know or use InVision? InVision is the prototyping tool. Studio is a new product that InVision came out with. And they had this like, hey, sign up, get early access, give us your email, we'll let you know when we have it ready.
Have you tried?
Yeah. So it was really good, but it was about a year. So I'm still wondering if they used that email submit to prove market interest.
Okay.
So let's say nobody signed up for it. I wonder if they would have launched. And so that's an example where, you could have something like that. The example that they use in Lean UX is on Flickr, they had a little feature, a fake button that said, make this photo my wallpaper. But it didn't work yet. They then tracked the heat mapping, the clicks, to see if people were interested. So I'm not a fan of having things that don't work anywhere ever. So that was tough for me to sort of get behind. But what I would say is that's a great way to prove a feature validity, or that people want that. But you better make sure you can react quickly. Like that has to happen very quickly. And if you click on it, maybe it could say, this feature is coming soon. We're so glad you're interested. So communicating to the user is always the best approach.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know about Flickr, that button.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So maybe sometimes when you're clicking on things and you're like, why isn't it reacting?
You are in the test. you are in the camera.
Mode. Yeah.
That's cool. So the prototype, then you receive feedback.
So then we basically, our MVP tells us if something is gonna work, or if people are interested in having that feature. It could be for a service, it could be functionality, and then we may push it a little further. We would have some sort of prototype to push now the real feature, or landing page or website or product, and we're always getting feedback and iterating. This is a constant loop. You don't just do it one time, you do it with multiple levels of fidelity, meaning I could test out, let's say I could just test this, a drawing. Do you know where to click here? So I could test that, and then I might go into wireframing, and then I would test that. And so that's the real, the big piece here that I always push, is it's all about iteration. Exhaust all your options. So let's see here. What do we have? Okay, we have somebody interested in learning more about the field of UX.
It will be a good fit.
Yeah. So that's great. Okay, so if it's a good, so whether or not it would be a good fit for you is, well, what I would say is there are characteristics or attributes of, I think, people, interest levels that would make it a good match. So are you creative? Do you like solving problems? Do you find yourself over-analyzing everything? So for example, when you push on a door or you pull a door, is it clear? And are you trying to then comment on it or redesign it? So sometimes when I try to push a door because it looks like I should push it, but it's actually pull, I'll start saying to the person that I'm with, well, that's bad user experience.
Okay.
Or push in that case. So if you're like that, or if you're using an app or a website and you say to yourself, well, that could have been a lot easier. You know what I would have done? I would have moved that button down here or changed the order or something. So all the time, yes. So that's where it gets interesting, and I think that's what keeps me engaged, is that I'm that kind of person also. And so I'm always out even in physical places. UX, experience design, is not just digital touch points, it's also in the physical world.
Yes, yeah. And also I would recommend to enter to Behance to see other portfolios of other designers and get inspiration every day to see what are the trends, what are the move or the users experience that brands are getting out there, putting out there. So you can start learning from it, and you can start testing, even subscribing to a newsletter of a brand, and you can see what's happened next, if they send you an email or if nothing happens. If the brand send you another email 3 days after saying, oh, well, you didn't came back, that's part of the UX.
Yeah, that's really like the journey, the customer journey, or the user journey is how are you reaching out? How are you communicating? There's so many different devices now. If I might go from, my phone to an email to I'm in the store. So if I'm at a brick and mortar, I could be on their website and then I could also be in the store the next day. Or vice versa. So the understanding the overall customer experience, the customer journey is super critical. And then, like I said, being if you come from a creative background, I think the best. So I wouldn't say every good UX UI designer it comes from a graphic design background. Because many students who've never designed before become amazing UX UI designers, or they're really strong in UX, and that maybe they're still pushing and need some formal training in the UI side. And by the way, just to clarify, UX is how it works, UI is how it looks. And they're really different disciplines. They're really not the same thing. And I would say if you're not comfortable in the visual design aspect, get really, really good at black and white, meaning wireframes. So I spent most of my career in a black and white world. And my core is user experience. UI, I can do it, but I wasn't formally trained in it, and I let the experts do that. But I also have worked for larger organizations that are structured in that way.
How do you know if, let's say I do the course of UX UI and then I decided I can be both also, or usually in the organizations you split it or...
Yeah, so that's a good question. It depends which organization you work. So if it's a smaller company, you may have a request to do like design as a whole, which would include all of UX, the research, all of that, all the way through to delivering the mock-ups to the development team. So that's for smaller. It will make you very marketable, a marketable hire. What I would say about that is that you're kind of creating waterfall again, because now I'm waiting for me to hand off to me. And so if I have a UX team and a visual team, we can parallel path, we can work together, collaborate, and come up with a really good product. So that would be, and people see things differently. They call them unicorns. I'm not a fan of that term. I value everybody's expertise. Now, again, if you work for a smaller company and you're really good at both, then some people are happy doing both and happy in an organization that gives them the time, if they allow them that time, and they're not saying, well, can you just skip the UX part? Because ultimately we really just need the UI. And that's the risk that you run by doing both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so if you don't do the UX part, you will be ended up on that side that you launch a product that wasn't reliable, or
it might not be fully tested or meet user needs or solve for friction points and things like that. Because most companies, I would say, and they're coming around, will start right in at design and not really understand why something is there, or if it doesn't work, or what those frictions are for the user. And so a lot of, and I always say this, a lot of what we do as UX/UI designers is putting the why behind what we're coming up with. So if I can do both and I create a beautiful color mock-up with all the copy and all the final images, then every single element on that screen has a reason why. So why is the button over there? Why are there 3 to 5 nav items? Why does a carousel only have 3 to 5? There's best practices behind all of that. Or user testing. Well, 1 out of 7 people, only 1 out of 7 people were able to complete this purchase of a product. Well, we had to change it. Yeah, we have to change it. And then when we change it, we can say with confidence, 7 out of 7 people easily bought this product in less than this time. And that's what we ultimately want, and that's how we get there through doing the UX process. And so that's really the overall process, and the rest of the slides are really templates to help assist you in putting those things together. So how you could word your problem statement, how you can literally hand draw out your persona. There's some funny people out there in the industry, UX people. So Jamie Levy, she wrote a strategy book, and she talks a lot about journeys. And what she does at her talks is she just Googles user journeys. And she talks about how nice looking, there's so many nice looking journeys, and the graphic designer on creating the journey probably spent like a week designing it. And this is after they've actually put the content together for the journey. And she's very honest to say, I don't like when companies waste my time in wanting to do that. So it's similar to Lean UX, where she's saying, don't spend all this time making something look really beautiful. Use the content. And she uses Excel spreadsheets for her journeys.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's no fancy anything, and she's not ashamed of saying that. And so, like an example here, a persona. I've seen, I don't know, every time we would create personas in agency world, they would always be different. Everyone was always trying to one-up the last journey, or persona in that case. So technically, you could just write it out with pencil and paper. No need in spending 2 weeks designing it.
Okay.
And so you'll have that template there.
Okay, yeah. It's basically all the process.
Yeah, you basically have what a template, it'll be a template or some examples of what are assumptions or what is a hypothesis and how you could put that statement together. And they're really brief statements. We definitely wouldn't be creating super lengthy documentation. That's the whole idea. And we kind of go through, we definitely go through the whole thing. And I even have a little fake experiment where I use, just like a fun, something tangible as an example. It's not even a digital product, just like I did with the Frank spray. So, yeah. So that will all be coming at you after this. If you shoot us the email, and you'll get the presentation that we've kind of been using to talk through right here. And I think...
Yes, everything's covered.
Yeah, everything's covered. There's one last thing that's worth talking about, one piece of Lean UX I really latch onto. And it's called the truth curve. And the truth curve, it will allow you to gain confidence in what you're creating. Just like I talked about before. So let's say as I move up the curve, my idea is, let's say, the automobile. So I could say, what do you think about an idea where there was this thing that had wheels that would get you from point A to B, it would be covered, and it would be fast. What do you think of that idea?
At that time, it will it will be so good for everyone.
Yeah, you're gonna, and so whatever that reaction is, it's either I don't even understand it because it's so new and future that maybe I don't. Yeah. And then the idea falls off and no one ever does it. But in that case, it sounds like a really good idea. I like it. Great. Now I'm going to move into maybe drawing something on paper. And then I would create the automobile sketch and say, show you, what do you think of the automobile? Remember that thing that we talked about? And then your confidence is getting better as you move up because I'm validating every step of the way.
Okay.
Yeah, and so then we would move into an actual prototype and even continue to learn when the live product goes out. And in that process, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. What's the most important thing we need to learn next? So we just had a conversation. What is the next thing I need to learn? And so maybe it is, how will you use the automobile? Or will you understand how to start it? Or will you feel comfortable driving it? So that's the next thing we need to learn next. What's the least amount of work we can do to learn this? And maybe it's just drawing it out, not building the whole car. And then it goes on and on. So
and today's products, you don't even look at the manual. They come. You just start the phone or something, and you just start exploring.
Yeah. And so is it intuitive? Those things will come out. Now, what usually happens is you have hundreds and thousands of experiments, or hundreds or thousands of experiments going on at any given time. Some of them fall off. Like, let's think about a couple. What's a product that we remember that was there and it was hot and then it was not? Can you think of any? Anybody out there?
Maybe Yahoo.
Okay.
Mail.
Yeah.
The mail.
And that one probably lasted a little bit longer. What about Google Plus?
Oh, yes.
Remember Google Plus? The Segway. Some of those things are like, it sounds really good, but in the end, it just doesn't pan out. And you could look at those as experiments. Remember Paper by Facebook?
I never used it.
Never heard of it. Paper was an app that Facebook came out with, and it was, I don't even know how to describe it, but that was another experiment. So those big companies will actually experiment quite a bit, and they're okay with, what they say is fail fast and learn, and then move on. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also okay to fall,
it's okay, it's okay to stumble.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a question?
We have a couple
everything.
Yes, Google Plus. Yes. Jay Castillo agrees.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some more examples because I know there's so many out there.
What do you think about Snapchat?
I like Snapchat because I don't use it often, but what I like about Snapchat is that it came out with a new format, kind of for news. And for when you, not so much the messaging and going back and forth and the filters and all that is super cool. But I love the format of their news. It's chunky, it's snackable, it's not long form. So I actually like what they've done with content. So I like that. Yeah.
I think we are out of time.
Okay.
So thank you for joining us. We have an amazing conversation here at WinCode. Will there be another podcast?
We'll let you know. Jay Castillo, send us your email and we'll definitely let you know. I don't know when the next one is. We just had one. It may be on the schedule, so I will check with our admissions team on that. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining all. And wait for the next UX session at the community. So thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Okay.